you for your patience. My name is Luke Crawford. I'm the development lead at Joint, and we're a hosting and application company. We're the official Ruby on Rails host. We have a lot of experience there, and we have some Office 2.0 Ruby on Rails apps, Joint connectors, a suite of applications, and that's what I spent most of my time on. But while we were developing it, we wanted to be able to run it offline, because that's, you really need to go to that. You want to access their email offline, they want to access their calendar offline. Any kind of shared data in this collaboration suite environment you want to still be able to use without a network. There are a lot of cases where you don't have a network. Another classic example on a plane, but even though Wi-Fi is available in so many places, you don't always have it. So we started looking at ways we could do that, and that led us to realize really nothing was out there that did exactly what we wanted. So the title of this is creating hybrid web applications, web and desktop applications with Rails and Slingshot. Slingshot is so background, kind of ready for it. We also, so what we did is first we started going through all the alternatives. There's Adobe Flex, but the problem with that is you need to you can still use JavaScript, you can still use markup, but you really actually need to write a whole new application. Silverlight didn't really want to go there, but again, it's not even really the web, it's just the network. It's a new API, it's a new stack, it's entirely different. Google Gears wasn't out when we started Slingshot, but it also is more about storing data with JavaScript locally. It's more about client-side programming. Firefox connects some cool new features also, like an offline data store. But what we really wanted was the ability to just write our Rails app and have it work on the desktop. We didn't want to have to worry about writing two things, maintaining two applications. We wanted to write one application and how to be able to synchronize data and do all that for us. So, hopping back here, what Slingshot lets you do is it lets your application appear on a full peer of desktop software. So by putting it on the desktop, it doesn't feel crippled. It doesn't feel like you're just clicking around in the web browser offline. And you have to address that a few ways. One, your application needs to be designed in such a way that it can feel that way. But we've added certain features, drag and drop. Also removes latency of the internet. It's running right on that personal machine, so you're able to push off processing. You can actually run your Slingshot app in mode where it will use the local data store all the time and then synchronize up to the network, so you're never actually going out to the internet even when you're online, if that works right for the application. And synchronization is one of the primary features that Slingshot does provide. And then I mentioned earlier, desktop-like user interfaces. It lets you do drag and drop in, drag something into the application, drag something out of the application. You have access to the menu bar to some extent. And it's a full application that runs in your dock, or you double click in your start bar. So Slingshot really is a combination of a lot of different pieces. It's an actual desktop Mac and Windows program, so an exe, a .app file. It's a Rails plugin that goes in the source tree, the vendor plugins directory of your Rails application. Within the desktop directory structure, so inside your package, your .app package on OS 10, or inside the install area on Windows, there's a Ruby and Mongrel runtime. So it's actually running, you figure how would you run a Rails app locally? It's still a three-tier architecture. It's a web server, an application server, and a database server. So we're using Mongrel locally, Ruby, and all those files are taken care of by Slingshot. Some conventions. There are certain things that you need to do. There are certain things that it does for you that if you do it a certain way, you get to take advantage of, and really you kind of need to do it that way, but it's just a few additional conventions we've added on. And it's also GPL2. It's completely open source. The project is, Slingshot is, to a certain point, complete. It's complete for normal CRUD applications, but for what we need for connector with full email and all the other features that it has, it's not actually there yet. So So we don't actually have an offline version of Connector yet, but we're committed to continuing to develop it at least to that point. And a lot of the feature requests that we've had from people are things we want to do anyways. We're trying to build up a community around it because Slingshot is application agnostic. It runs any Rails app. So what you can do with it, create this hybrid application that really works exactly the same on or offline. It feels exactly the same for the user. One difference on the desktop though is there's no address bar because we did make the choice. We don't want it to be the internet. We want it to be an application from the user's point of view. So that affects a couple design decisions you need to have. You need to always have a way to go someplace with a back button. You might want to draw things a little differently to indicate presence of where you're at there. But it's basically just any website is pretty much going to work there. So you can synchronize your database and then also just store files in the file system, which a lot of applications do. You can synchronize those. Key focus, same code online, offline. There's certain flags though, because for instance with our email client, when you send an email, you need to introduce the concept of an outbox. And so that would be an offline only feature. But that part of the code actually in Slingshot is only so-so right now, but that's, it's getting better, and that's going to be one of the things where if you really do have an application that has strong community of offline users, it makes sense to tweak it and make it work for both people. But still, that same code base is going to work either environment. You can update your application code also in the Slingshot facility. You can find, and we're still working on filing some standard for this, but basically an update package, and you can update gems within the VM also that would come through as a Slingshot update. Then also, as mentioned before, drag and drop. So, kind of already talked about that. For me, though, the big advantage is the second one. I can continue to program with the environment I prefer and I choose to develop in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Ruby, Rails. That's what I want to work in, and none of these other alternatives let you do that, essentially. All right, so right here, where is it currently being used? There's about 4 or 5 applications inside Apple that officially Ruby on Rails isn't an internal Apple language. And I have one friend who works with iTunes Music Store actually, and he's developed several Rails applications to help manage their database, like just simple facades to do certain tasks. And they're not technically supposed to use those applications. So some Apple developers have wrapped it up in a Slingshot app and then passed around this Cocoa application that managers don't have PowerPoint. There's a farm application for cows. I don't know exactly, but I was talking to a guy who's been using Slingshot for, they have a normal web app that is developed for managing data about cows. I think it was like artificial insemination or something like that, but normally what they would have to do is they'd have to fill it out on paper at the farm with the cows, go back, and then fill it all in. I don't know the volume of what they're working with, but I'm sure it must be relatively high if they've written software for it. So they can now bring an application, or bring a laptop right with them, run it, and then upload the data back when they reconnect. And it's about as easy they're about as transparent of a thing they need to do and actually start doing that. That's the ideal kind of application, or the internal small company, small application that's written in Rails. That's the perfect target market for Rails itself, and that's the perfect target market for what Slingshot is capable of doing today. These are normal, straightforward, simple code apps. There's a government internal app that I really can't say what it is, but it's not that big of a deal. It's just they're using Slingshot and actually helped. One of the reasons why I decided to develop it, because we're a relatively small company, and going and writing a Windows app and a Cocoa app as a Rails shop is to me it's a little intimidating. I thought we were maybe fighting more with shoot. We had this partner to help us with it, and they had specific needs that also helped drive with Slingshot development we did. So it had some backing that made it happen right. And then lastly, Joint Connector, which we can do some things. You can actually see it here running. It's a connector on the right in the people application, and this isn't actually like, it's not like a big screenshot. There's an arrow drawn over. You can actually draw the D card, drag the D card into the Finder, and it creates the D card file, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to do a demo of that right now, actually, off the internet, which we don't have, but downloaded it. So it's pretty boring, but we'll watch it. Right now you can see it's online, and let's speed this up for all of our standard. Okay, so we go offline, and now we go ahead and click, and clicking the new event plus sign in there is still pointing out stuff. So I'm going to create an event. If you look at the address bar, you can see that it's running on port 3000. This is actually, when it runs port 3000 on your computer. So the Slingshot wrapper, the Slingshot desktop application, is just connecting to Mongo on port 3000. Here, though, just for the demo purposes, we're just running it. This is on a developer's box, and he just was connecting a web browser directly to port 3000. From the back-end point of view, it's exactly the same. The advantage from the user's point of view, though, is having this alternative front end. They don't actually need to touch a web browser at all. So here he's creating an event. This is all running locally, and there's the new event. It's on the day, you can see. And now opening up Slingshot itself. So that was the .app binary. It's loading up. Asking the person to log in. Switching to, so you can see right here is forcing a manual down sync. Now you can see that the event is there. I think I misspoke earlier. He was just pointing out that it was online. Now we're actually going offline. There's an example of drag and drop out. Show comments to the file very, very quickly. Drag in here, this is dragging in an ICS file, and it just added the events from that. I'll talk later on how that happens. And here's just going to show package contents, which we'll go into later also actually. So I mean, just a quick little run through of the user interacting with that. So, okay, what's the architecture of this app? From a network point of view, you run your Rails server just as normal. I'll use connector as the example because that's the app I'm most familiar with. So, connector is running on the server. We run OpenJoin.net subdomain, and that's our code base that we maintain. It's something we have to SSH into securely. We're running the source code, which is the same source code, which is inside of the user's local application package. And so by implementation, your app will be open source. The source will actually technically be available to them. We made the choice to open source both Connector and Slingshot. But so it doesn't necessarily work if you have a closed source application and a lot of Rails apps on the internet are closed source. But for the type of situation where you're a business and you want to let people have this offline access to your internal applications, it shouldn't be an issue at all. Then you also have a local Rails server on the client, which runs whenever the Slingshotted app is running. And they just talk to each other. Software-wise, it's either the Mac or Windows application, plugin, the Ruby application server, and Mongo web server, and then your application's code. Here is just a screenshot of the desktop application. Our reference application that we worked with when we were developing this was Radiant, because we used the Radiant CMS for our joint.com website, and we wanted the ability to edit it locally and just prove that we could do that. So here is the app running, and you can see that there's really nothing. It's just a title bar, it's it's got this thing here, or the status bar, so you can still see where links would go. A little bit of the source code, Cocoa on the map. And you can see right here, sync downward, sync upward, some of the key methods. Here is C# for the PC. So it's either Xcode or Visual Studio. So and these so there's all the different pieces are all open source. The Rails plugin is open source. The Ruby runtime, which is really more part of the binary desktop application, is open source. And then either one of these projects you can download and hack on. I'd love to see something like more menu bar integration for OS 10, for instance, and you just fire up an Xcode and work on that. Here we go. So the Rails synchronizes at the database level. The advantage of that is you don't really need to worry about it. It just looks at the tables, uses active record, and so you can add rules or enter active records to make sure that happens right. And then it provides hooks in this aggregate data method in the Slingshot sync controller. So it does add a controller to your application which handles the communication between the client and the client's server and then the server. Also, we can run other processes locally. Normally, we've just been doing this running Ruby scripts. There's a lot of things you might want to do. You noticed in that video demo that there was a manual sync up and down. We've left that in. We talked about it right now. That's just because it's still somewhat of an under development project. We're just leaving that in. But you could write a process to automatically initiate the syncs, so the user never even has to think about that. And it'd be pretty trivial to do that. But you also, just any kind of background process that needs to manage data, run it, do something with it. Here we can see a little bit of the Ruby Mongrel runtime. So at the first place, I've CD'd into radiant.app, and you can see it's got some normal OS 10 application stuff. The contents also. Inside the VM directory, there's a couple things that we care about. One is trunk. That's actually where your Rails app goes, which we call your Rails app or whatever. That's called trunk for now. Slingshot config.xml has a few things like drag and drop configuration information, and it can have information about the server, what server your application is talking up to, but you can actually configure that through the preferences window also. And a bunch of scripts. Some of these are shell scripts, some of them are Ruby scripts. And you can see that there's a .bat batch file equivalent for the shell script, so it can work on Windows or Unix. And it's been a while since I've seen those. So that's all those binary files, or rather applications which run in the shell. So the thing I want to mention about this though is we implemented the client applications, the binary Cocoa and C# applications as minimally as possible. So we've done everything that we can in the Rails plugin or in the Ruby scripts that run in the console or whatever, and just in the background. Reason being, we're all Rails developers. Our target market is Rails developers, and that's the language most people are going to be familiar with. I don't know a single bit of C#. We have one person who could do it and did it. He lives in Boston too, actually, and most of our company's in San Francisco. But I'm, as a Rails developer, I'm really glad about that because I can open up these files and I really understand what's going on. So what do you actually need to do to get your application slung? Install a plugin, just normally. All of the tables which you want to synchronize need to have created at and updated at columns. If it's created on, that's just the date, so it needs to be the actual date timestamp. So you can just do that. A migration. Add routes. I'll show you what that is in a second. The sync controller. I'll show you that sync controller is that Slingshot sync controller, and it just lives in app controllers. And there are several methods in there that you can implement. Aggregate data is the only one that you need to implement. Dragging this. Yeah, it's the method. And I mean, all of this is publicly available. And there will be a link to it so you can actually see it. It's pretty straightforward, actually. Dragging, this means dragging from the application out. It's actually really rudimentary, so to take advantage of it, you need to, just by being aware of it, it's really easy to take advantage of it. You just drag a link and then it downloads a file. So it's really more a handy way to download. So when you saw it download a vCard, all of this is a link to an action which generates a vCard file. And it only works in OS 10 right now. Drop, that's where we use this config file. And this is a little sample config file. And right now the target, so the one thing I'd like to see improve in Slingshot actually is to have different targets that you can maybe define by, I don't know, like CSS classes maybe or something. But right now it's just the entire window. So per action you have one drop target. And you can see right here, file drop, I'll just go ahead and use the top example, the extension for the file. I'm sorry, I just misspoke. Okay, there's two levels of drop that we want to see. Right now we have the ultra basic one. The next level is going to be per action. You can actually configure what happens when something is dropped. And then the action after that would be regions. But where we stop right now in the first phase is no matter where your application is at, no matter what page the user is viewing, it deals with files in a certain way. So if you drag a vCard file into our slingshotted connector, it'll post to that URI, it'll give that, use that parameter, and then it will encode the contents of the file that you drag as the value to that parameter. And then when it's done, it will go to a specific return UI. That's really more like, it's kind of like parameterized callback. And there's a lot more callbacks we could add, but for now, this is 99% of the cases that you care about. And then there's a catch-all wildcard. We have a files application, so if somebody uploads a vCard, our people application knows how to parse that and actually turn that into more intelligent data, a contact card. But if it's a file we don't know how to handle, we just throw it into the files application where people can share files. With respect to the conventions, both platforms, C# and the .NET environment is common on Windows. Code is what you want to use if you're using a Mac application. So it's a normal .app package. Packages is a DMV. There's UG. The nib files were all from Xcode, so you can open those up even if you're not really interested in hacking the actual C, Objective-C, and just move things around the window and use property lists for the settings. NSIS is the nullsoft installer system or something like that, but it's a common open source way of creating installer.exe or whatever they call them nowadays, Windows installers. And then there's an open source, maybe not open source, but it's just a free software, Resource Hacker, which is a program that a lot of people use on Windows to actually create remote and resources, so we use those. What does it not do yet? Yeah, I'd be disingenuous to say Slingshot is done right now. Because, from my point of view, I think Slingshot is going to be done with a Run connector, which I would consider a relatively advanced Rails application. And the trick is also it does a lot more than just Rails. There's a lot of background processes and such, which we can run here, but need to get more robust. So the big thing it doesn't do that people ask all the time about is synchronization, conflict resolution. And that's one of those problems that is not fully solvable in a completely generic way. There's a lot of things you can do to help mitigate it, like versioning records, or the thing that we're actually planning to do is we're planning to create, we talked about this with some of the Slingshot open source developers also. What can we do that's going to work for every single Rails application? And I think one of the things that has anybody here seen when you're synchronizing with OS 10 address book, how it deals with conflict resolution? Or, it's actually really basically the same as if you merge two files that you have a div and you're merging two files. You've got something on the left, you've got something on the right, and if they conflict, you can pick either or. And address book on Macs does a really great job of presenting a good UI. It shows you them both, you click one, and we want to have some way that we do that. And that would actually have to be implemented not in your HTML, CSS world to function properly, would be another thing that would pop up at the operating system level. So there's some strategies we have there. It doesn't encrypt your code. We're not planning on doing it, but if somebody cares that much and they want to use it. Ultimately, it's still got to be unencrypted. It's just the whole DRM issue. So we're not going to go there, but I'm sure somebody could do something to be more secure if we would work with it. Domain-specific online-offline issues we talked about. It has basic am I online or offline, but you want to have a look at more facilities for events, Rails events that would actually be a problem that happens, or really scripts locally that you could run. We don't have automatic packaging, so you've got to do a lot of, copy the structure of the slingshot.app, you check out of SVN, and then open up the package and copy stuff and paste your icon files. And updating itself automatically, you can do it with the normal hooks that are there, but it'd be a huge pain, so we want to make that more automatic so you can save it as little pieces. Demo. Let's go over here. When I did this presentation at RailsConf Europe, I actually did a real demo where I actually slingshotted an application. And I'm on a different computer now. I've never had time to get that all set up today. So what I'm going to do instead is just show you a few things that are relevant. So here's Radiant.app. This is slingshot version of Radiant. And you can see all the Mac files. And then here is the Ruby world. Slingshot config XML. This is the one from the screenshot before where I showed the connector config file. We're not using drag and drop for Radiant, so it's pretty much a null file. And you can go to the actual code though. Look down in vendor, you can see the Slingshot plugin. So we could take a look at this, but this is all in like a publicly readable SVN repository. But it's got your serialization code. So that's the plugin. And what it does is it adds a generator. So you run generate whatever, and it will, pretty much all it does is it adds this controller. Where is it? I'm not seeing it there, actually. It's kind of weird. So I'll just show it. It's right here in the plugin. Some of the tasks, generate. Okay, so this is the file that's going to copy in, and there's an up synchronization method. There's down, and then there's aggregate. Yeah, I'm not going to waste your time showing you this. I'm sorry that I didn't have this part of it prepared, but basically, there was a question earlier about how do you actually do that. There's this aggregate data method, which when you get your controller, it's right there, and you just list, essentially, you kind of build an array of all the classes, all of the active record classes that you want to synchronize, and you gather all of these records, and when they get serialized by Slingshot, it will include their ID number, it will include their class number. So you're pretty much just responsible for building this huge array of what you want to synchronize. And that'll let you do things like, and you can prepare your data there ahead of time if you don't want to send certain fields, or if you want to sanitize it immediately. So it's one method, you just return an array of records to synchronize, and then it does the rest for you. I guess that's about it. I don't know if anybody has any questions about this.
First thing would be, are you using CodeKit or
Oh, yeah, great question. We use the Internet Explorer rendering engine on Windows. We use WebKit on Macs. And on the mailing list, there's been talk about writing the Linux version. And they're planning on using Gecko. I think that's a great idea because our connector, our target browsers, we target all three and support them all 100%. I think we really ought to still nowadays. So that would be a great way to help Slingshot encourage that. Do you have a question?
Any idea when Linux version will be coming?
No, we're not doing one. But like I said, the actual local part, like if you knew, like for instance, I don't really do much. I don't really know Objective-C, but I've done a little messing around. You can go through the sample things, and there's like the build a web browser with WebKit in one day kind of thing. It's not much more than that, really. If you know how to do that with, Qt or GTK, then you could probably write it, especially because you have two reference applications to consider. Any other questions? All right, I wish I could have shown you the demo, but check it out. There's the last slide. This is the URL, which is basically the homepage for the application, and that's where you can find info on all Joinit's open source projects. Code is there, our wiki, which is mostly our documentation, and then info about the mailing list.